Hi, I'm Alice Hoffmann, an indie artist from Austria. Unfortunately, this video got finished quite a bit later than I intended. I got COVID for the first time on Thursday. No worries, my symptoms are slowly but steadily decreasing, even if I probably still sound pretty battered. Just a heads up, this week's artwork won't be finished in this video because I'm really slow at anything productive at the moment. Anyway, let's continue where we left off last week. Like many other European artists in my age range, I discovered manga when I was 11 and immediately had the answer to my struggles to find a creative direction that makes sense for me. Yeah, you heard that right, at age 11. Buying new manga every week at a bookstore close to my school was the #1 thing I absolutely looked forward to. Back then, nearly every story was impactful because I hadn't experienced so many tropes yet. Nowadays, I'm fairly critical of the series I read or watch and have a hard time just relaxing and having my mind blown. So sometimes I kinda long for that time and have fond memories of it. I do remember that I also had some challenging events happening, like not really fitting in with the other kids at school, but overall I think of this as a pleasant time where everything just became more colorful. I suddenly had a clear direction and a burning passion. I've been embarrassed by having been a pretty typical weeb for a long time, but I think I might be at a point where I can just let go of that. I was lonely, felt lost, and just needed to hold on to something for a bit. It seemed like something bigger than me. Kinda like religion, huh? I didn't realize the irony in that for a long time, to be honest. Back then, I drew manga like a machine. I was severely limited by the lack of information for efficient ways to exercise, and my anatomy skills were god-awful for a long time. That was the same for the vast majority of artists, so it was also difficult to get reliable feedback from others. I was of course pretty impressionable as a young kid who just started publishing the manga art online in a space that just never existed before. I actually got a lot of positive feedback, but at that fragile emotional stage the negative feedback impacted me heavily. Looking back at it, of course that stuff is never personal. Even with all that, I still won the occasional local contest and felt like sort of a big fish in my little pond. Based on this, it seemed obvious to me that one day somehow I'd become a real big shot. I think you can objectively say that I was arrogant. That was definitely a coping mechanism because I also had started to devalue myself in my own mind at some point. Those opposite forces were both putting in a hell lot of energy. You know, I used to judge myself so harshly for it, but I'm starting to realize just how optional it is to judge anything. It is so freeing. I don't really have a smooth transition for the next topic, but it will be important later on, so please bear with me. Anyway, I have a weirdly shaped scar on my left calf. When I was 13, for the first time my mother told me about an accident that happened when I was a baby. She had guests and their kids visiting us. The adults were in the garden while I slept in my crib. Mom wanted to check on me but let her guests persuade her that everything was okay. Meanwhile, the two young boys took me out of my bed, apparently because they wanted to carry me to the others. One of them bit my leg. Maybe because I yelled, maybe because I was just that delicious looking. I mean, I'm not everyone's taste, but I am a snack. Anyway, they moved me with the skill you'd expect of small children, and so apparently I ended up in hospital for about a month. I was a little less than 2 weeks old when it happened, by the way. The only thing I thought of this event, back when I heard her tell me the story, was that revenge would be the correct answer. But Mom just wouldn't tell me the kids' names, etc., so the urge for vendetta was going exactly nowhere. Which is good, because come on, what good would it have done? Other than that, it seemed like an odd anecdote, a little interesting flake of spice in my life story, so to say. Some of you may be able to see that it wasn't that unimpactful, but we'll save the rest for next week's video part. I didn't receive my answer that early on myself after all. One very nice aspect of my tweens was that I found some friends. Most of them still superficial relationships, but surprisingly I sometimes still meet up with a few of those people. Sometimes friendship was easy breezy and even fun. I mention this because thinking back, there was actually a lot more work involved with it than I realized. There were a lot of little aspects of socializing that I felt I lacked the instructions for, so one day I had the galaxy brain thought that, oh, everyone probably just figures out these puzzles by observing and concentrating properly on what they see. Yeah, and so I sometimes managed to blend in with others pretty okay-ishly, and other times I felt like I'm about to explode if I don't let my true self out at least a little bit. So can you imagine what a huge event it was for me when I visited my first anime convention when I was 15? Time went by so fast in that place and I loved every second of it. Even though I slept awfully when I was there. I mean, nowadays that probably wouldn't fly anymore, but that convention offered the option to sleep in the con hall and just stay there all the time basically. I didn't even get any of the mattresses and slept on the floor in my sleeping bag. If I'd pulled this shit today, my back would never let me hear the end of it. Of course, I was still shy around new people, but seeing that there is a place and time where I don't have to play 4D chess to be accepted was pretty great. One person I met at that con later on became my best friend, in quotation marks, mind you. Oh, don't get me wrong, for a while they played that role extraordinarily well. They were just what I didn't even know I was hoping for. Very caring, loved to chat with me all the time, and I mean all the time. Perfectly fitting like the right puzzle piece. They even gave me a pretty generous birthday gift not even 2 weeks after the con. Have you ever heard of love bombing? Look it up and you'll understand where I'm going with this. After a few months, that person increasingly often got angry with little things I said or did. Increasingly often over random stuff, no matter how I tried to adjust my behavior, because it seemed obvious to me that this great, gentle person would of course not come up with these sort of reactions for no reason. Then there were other times where they hardcore praised me, told me over and over again how we are soulmates. Of course only when no one was around, mind you. Oh, and of course, we intended to do a bunch of projects, but nothing went anywhere because they never finished their writing and meanwhile had a ton of criticism left for anything I made, while not really knowing what they wanted. Typical micromanager shit. This sort of stuff really messes with your self-perception over time and can entrap you in thinking every wrong turn is your fault somehow. I tried to make it work with this narcissistic best friend for about 7 years and I really wanted to help them. Seriously. Because they had an oh-so-sad sob background story. But yeah, in doing that, I just ended up sacrificing my own well-being for a good while. I learned the hard way that you just can't save other people. They've got to do the work themselves. But as much as they hurt me, I know they hurt themselves the most. They had a lot of volatile, high-drama relationships in general. It was hard to watch, and in the end, breaking off any contact was one of the best decisions I ever made. It would be great if they can one day find better arrangements with their inner demons. I still do want that person to thrive. I just won't make it my business anymore. You know, this person used to be the major focus point of my life. Nowadays they just don't matter to me anymore unless I actively heat up my memories and get back into the pain I felt and talk myself into wanting retribution. It all feels like this must have happened in a different lifetime entirely. Oh well, adolescence in general was quite exhausting for me. There were a lot of one-sided crushes which made me feel even more unlovable, but I kept going with confessing my feelings no matter how pointless it seemed. I guess the reason why I did that was the good old shonen philosophy of never giving up. Of course, I stopped pursuing people after a clear rejection. That's not giving up. That's just not being an insufferable asshole. being obviously unusual in some way that I couldn't put my finger on made it harsh to get through those days. However, I'm glad that I hated alcohol and loud noises too much to get into partying. I may have been lonely, but at least my liver has no reason to complain now. Meanwhile, my mother insisted I'm definitely normal. I still did my best at school, but in the second to last high school year my grades significantly dropped. I was out of steam and remembered how much brighter everything seemed when I was 11. Man, what a low age to peak. At some point, a classmate put a fake love letter into my desk to make fun of me. It had some ugly ass drawings in it, but you know, whatever. I was open for anything at that point and just appreciated that someone out there wants something from me. Of course that pathetic coward lied to me when I asked if he put it into my school desk, because it's so much easier to bully someone from a safe distance. Also, a supposed friend, in quotation marks again, gave that guy my phone number, so he also harassed me for a while with stupid messages. Of course, he blamed me for being naive enough to think I'd get a genuine love letter at all. Yeah, you know, that only added to my lack of self-worth, so thanks for that. Somehow I was still good enough to have my homework notebook taken away and copied every now and then. So it might be understandable that in the last few months of high school I talked to exactly no one anymore unless I absolutely had to. Well, good thing is, this is not where the story ends. At a Japanese course I finally found my boyfriend. Luckily I got the last spot there. I don't think there could have been any other place where we might have coincidentally met later on. So it does feel a little bit like destiny. We've been together for over 13 years now, and I deeply appreciate that our relationship is one of the easiest and most fulfilling parts of my life. Despite everything that happened before, it seems that I must have redeemed some sort of cheat code at life. Next week I'll close this series with what my last few years were like. By the way, I'll probably keep Sunday as my new day for updates. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye!